Let's talk about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, because we have a new Star Trek movie coming out in a few weeks. And before that, I thought it would be fun to go through all of the previous Star Trek films and just kind of review the franchise. And here we are in the second entry, Star Trek II. And I think it's still the best Star Trek movie overall of all the films in the Star Trek franchise. And I've seen them all and liked a lot of them. But Star Trek II is still far and away my favorite. Far and away, I think, the best movie in the Star Trek franchise. And the reason is because it gets so much right and it understands what Star Trek is and what the strengths of Star Trek are in a way that most of the other films and in fact that many of the other television episodes just don't quite understand. It really plays to Star Trek's strengths in a way that few other examples of Star Trek do. And I'll tell you what I mean. First of all, it really understands and is really interested in the characters, in the relationships. That's one of the strongest points of Star Trek. And in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, for all of the things I enjoyed about that movie, like the connection to the real world, the connection of NASA through the Voyager probe to the Star Trek world, I thought that was brilliant. But it didn't really focus as much on the character moments. There were moments between Kirk and Spock and Kirk and McCoy, and the characters did connect to each other at various points, but it felt almost like afterthoughts. That wasn't what the movie was really about. Star Trek II feels like it's really about the characters. It really is centrally about the growing older of Captain Kirk, the changing of the relationships between Kirk and McCoy and Spock, the realizing of certain limitations being reached as you get older. It's really about that, and that makes it a very powerful, very strong movie, and a movie that you can watch again and again and still enjoy and still get something from, because it takes these characters very seriously and examines them in a way that feels very compelling and feels very rich. And at the same time, even though it takes its characters seriously and is very keenly interested in these characters and in showing them in a different place in their lives than we have seen them in the previous incarnations of Star Trek, it doesn't make the mistake that Star Trek: The Motion Picture made of trying to take everything very seriously and presenting it as though it were a serious science fiction film. This is very much an adventure movie. This is Star Trek how I like it, an adventure film with astronauts as the heroes, as I said in the previous review. An adventure movie where it's not cowboys, it's Captain Kirk and Spock and McCoy. And I think that's really where Star Trek shines. That's really where it works best, because it is essentially a bit of pulp fiction. You know, it's something that is best when it's treated as an adventure story, not as some super serious bit of science fiction. And Star Trek II is that all the way. It's a revenge story. It's an enemy from Captain Kirk's past coming back to get revenge, and all of this really cool adventure story stuff that works just tremendously, works very well. And there's also the sense of there's a sense of Starfleet in this as being much more of a military organization, which I feel works very well. I know Gene Roddenberry apparently hated that, didn't like to present Starfleet or the Federation as a military organization, but the script here by Nicholas Meyer and Harve Bennett, and then also the direction by Nicholas Meyer, really presents Starfleet as a military organization, and presents the Enterprise as like a submarine. You know, the set design, which is mostly reused from the motion picture to save money, but it's lit, it's shot much more like a real naval vessel than like a floating living room. You know, one of the things I always found funny about Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I think was a great show, is how huge and spacious and comfortable the ship was. It was like a hotel in space. It was like a luxury hotel flying through space at thousands of times the speed of light. The ship in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan seems like a vessel. It seems like a ship that people live in. The quarters are not huge, spacious suites from what we see of them. The bridge looks very functional, very realistic. Lots of mechanical buttons, and it just feels, there's a sense of reality to it. It just feels like these are people on a vessel traveling through space, and it doesn't feel luxurious, and it doesn't feel pampered and they seem like they're people with a job and they're doing their job. And that works very well for Star Trek. Just as Star Trek the Motion Picture began after some time had passed for the characters, they do that same trick. They use that same device to start Star Trek II. Apparently, yet more time has now passed between Star Trek the Motion Picture and the beginning of Star Trek II. Everybody is a little bit older still, and the characters are also sort of separated now. They're all still in Starfleet. McCoy has not gone back to retirement. He's still around. Spock is still around. Spock has been promoted to captain of the Enterprise, but the Enterprise is now like a training ship. Captain Kirk is still an admiral. He's no longer in command of the ship. And again, we have this feeling of time passing and of separation. But this time, that note is sounded much more strongly. This time, the aging of Captain Kirk and the inevitability of him not being able to go off and have adventures in the stars for very much longer is very apparent. And there's a really good scene early in the film where Dr. McCoy visits Kirk on his birthday. And it's the first and I think only time in any incarnation of Star Trek that we ever see Captain Kirk's house. We actually see where he lives outside of the starship. There is a scene in Star Trek Generations where we see one of Captain Kirk's houses, but I'll get to that when I get there. In the original motion picture series from Star Treks 1 through 6, plus all the episodes of Star Trek they did back in the 60s, we never see Captain Kirk's house until except in this brief scene in Star Trek 2. And even the decor of the house reinforces this theme of the passage of time and aging. Kirk's house, there are clocks everywhere. It's decorated with antiques. Spock's gift to Kirk for his birthday is a pair of old eyeglasses, which he gives to Kirk because he knows that he likes antiques. So you see Captain Kirk going from the commander of the Enterprise, the dynamic young hero that we saw on TV in the 60s, to a guy who collects antiques. And it's a really strong moment and a really great place to start with from Captain Kirk. And we spend the rest of the film watching him not only grapple with Khan, this villain who emerges from his past to threaten him, but also with mortality, with the passage of time. And ultimately the film ends with the sacrifice of Spock, the ultimate sign of mortality. When your friends start to die, that's when you know that you're getting old, and that's what Kirk has to confront at the very end of this film. He has to confront not only his own mortality, but the mortality of his friends, of his loved ones, and yet somehow still find a sense of peace and a sense of meaning in the midst of all that. And he does. That's why the ending of Star Trek II works so well and is such a beautiful ending to me, is because even though he has to face these very difficult truths about life that he has never had to face before, he does, and he seems to find some sense of peace with it. And that's what makes it such a strong and such a satisfying ending. And there was some talk at the time that this would be the only other Star Trek film that they would make. Star Trek II wound up being a huge hit film, and of course, because of it, they made the rest of the Star Trek franchise. But at the time, Star Trek the Motion Picture had not been a huge hit, and they figured, okay, we'll do one more and see if this takes, but if not, we'll just end it here. And it would have been a very good place to leave Captain Kirk, if indeed that had been the last Star Trek film. The end of Star Trek II is a very nice place to leave these characters. Spock is dead. He has died heroically. Kirk has come to terms with his aging and his mortality. He's on the bridge of his ship with his best remaining friend, Dr. McCoy, on one side, and his former love, Carol Marcus, on the other side, and his son is there. And it's just sort of a nice place to leave him. And it would have been if they had not continued the series. And of course then there's hamming it up, chewing up all the scenery in sight as the villain, the great cartoon villain, Ricardo Montalban as Khan, really brings a sense of drama and flair, and really contributes to the adventure series tone of this one. Really, he is not the villain of a serious movie. He is not a serious literary villain. He is a big comic book supervillain and with his bare chest and his crazy big hair and his scheming plan to destroy Captain Kirk. He is the ultimate Pulp Fiction villain, and he really does so well in Star Trek 2. He's absolutely great. And then there's that great device where they keep him and Kirk separate. It's such a when I've talked about all the other things I like about Star Trek 2, about its tone and its characters and its acting, and one of the things I love about it is just how well plotted it is and how well written it is and how it takes chances with its story, because most of the time in a story like this, in an adventure story where a hero faces off against a villain, you're going to bring the hero and the villain together at some point. There might be some cat and mouse, but eventually they're going to butt heads. And the headbutting in Star Trek 2 is all from a distance. It's all mental. It's all strategy and like playing a chess game. Kirk and Khan are never together in the same place. They never touch. They face each other directly only once. Through view screens, when Khan is on the ship that he has stolen and Kirk is on the bridge of the Enterprise, and they have a little exchange through the view screen. But that's the only time that they're actually together in any sense in the movie. They're not. There is no fight between Kirk and Khan, and that is such a great chance to take, and it pays off so wonderfully because it allows them to have sort of an even match. There's just a mental showdown that Kirk ultimately only wins because Spock sacrifices himself. It's not like he outsmarts Khan and outmaneuvers Khan. He does. He outmaneuvers him enough to damage Khan's ship, but Khan is still able to trigger the Genesis device that would kill everybody. Khan would win in a sense. He would kill Captain Kirk, if not for the sacrifice of Spock. And that to me is a much more satisfying conflict, a much more exciting conflict, and a much more satisfying resolution to the conflict than having Kirk beam over to the ship and just, find a way to kick Khan's ass. That wouldn't have been nearly as cool. And also, if they had done that more physical ending, we probably wouldn't have gotten Ricardo Montalban's insane dying monologue as he is turning the dials and triggering the Genesis device. He's doing this absurd, like, sci-fi, goofy business where he's turning on this bomb that's going to blow up the ship and turn the nebula into a planet. All this crazy stuff is about to happen. And here he is delivering this hammy, Shakespearean monologue, quoting Moby Dick and, from hell's heart I stab at thee, for hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee. It's just it's so gloriously bad, and it fits so well with the rest of the movie. You could drop some pure piece of just absolute cheese in the middle, and it still works with the rest of the movie. That is a good movie. That is a good Star Trek movie. When you can take something like Ricardo Montalban's Khan, which is this completely preposterous character, and is just acting for the cheap seats, is just going for it. And you can drop him in there, and he works beautifully. That is a good movie. That is a good movie. I mentioned in the review for Star Trek: The Motion Picture that Robert Wise probably had the best pedigree of any Star Trek director. For my money, the best Star Trek director, the guy who directed and also co-wrote the best Star Trek films, is Nicholas Meyer. He is not a fan of Star Trek. He has said so, but he does know how to do Star Trek and do it right and do it to the best of its potential. Star Trek II is absolutely the best Star Trek film yet made, and the other film in the Star Trek series that Nick Meyer directed, Star Trek VI, for my money, is right behind it. We'll get to that one in due time, but for now, I will sing the praise all day if I have to of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Absolutely the best acted, the best written, the best directed all around, and the most fun. The best Star Trek film yet made.